Buenos días, buenas tardes a todos y todas, y muchas gracias por
Good morning, good afternoon to all present, and thank you very much to be present here on this new scenario and technologies for us to be able to improve our work. And this is an initiative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Brazil and PRODEN, Mercosul, with the support of the Regional Center for the Development of Information Society, Cetic.br and NIC.br, and also the Economic Commission for Latin American and Caribbean, ECLAC. My name is Ana Laura Martinez from Cetic.com.br, and before starting, I would like to share with you some of the practical questions and issues for our presentation. First of all, this is being transmitted or aired, broadcast in 3 languages, so there is simultaneous interpretation, English, Spanish, and Portuguese. And also, you can listen to the floor. This is your choice. If you have any wish at any time to change the language, it is just to click on the global sign at the end of the screen and decide what language you would like to listen to it. And also, we can use the chat, so you can place and post your question either in Spanish, Portuguese, or in English. In addition to questions, you can send us messages based on the discussions of the panel. First of all, I'd like to wish you a good day and also pass the floor to Luciana Mancini from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Brazil to start our event and give us a couple of words in her welcoming note. Thank you very much, Ana Laura, for this opportunity. Very good morning or good afternoon to all. On behalf of the government of Brazil and especially on behalf of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I would like to say welcome to this seminar for us to be able to talk about our developments in Mercosul with the new advancements in internet technology. I would like also to say a word of thanks from Cetic, which is the Regional Center for the Development of the Studies for the Information Technology, and also NIC.com.br for the development of this partnership in the region and in Brazil, and for us to be able to work out all the issues related to this event. In 2017, there was this group created for the development of a digital region at Mercosul. Ever since, there were new developments and new national rules, measurements for the development of negotiations, and also a couple of agreements that have been signed for our digital signature in Mercosul. Brazil is in the lead from July to December this year in Mercosul. So that is giving us the chance of developing new measurements to go ahead with our projects for the benefit of all the countries that are members. I would like to quote just 2 examples that have been on the table. There will be a new blueprint for the next 2 years with regards to initiatives related to security, blockchain, and also digital integration. In addition, we have been working on a declaration with regards to the digital integration in the region. And that will be a paper that should be used as a guideline for the future developments and future projects, principally with regards to the implementation of new blueprint of this group. This is, however, not exactly a reality to all members. Sometimes certain things are related to a second or secondary point, principally because of the red tape that exists between borders. Nevertheless, we are working to change this digital scenario. And of course, this requires from us a good combination of efforts for us to work together towards our progress and our developments. So in the past, processes such as change of information or authorities that were not granted, that was in the past. There was a lot of red tape. Nevertheless, now there is this network that is used to speed up the process. So in this context, we are, by use of this webinar, considering that this is a great advance with regards to the digital integration in Mercosul. So it is extremely positive. We are trying to enhance the visibility of this aspect of our interaction and also trying to give a push with regards to the digital process of digital transformation in the bloc and in the region. This webinar that is being conducted today, as Ana Laura mentioned, which is the Digital Transformation Scenario webinar with the new technologies for innovation and productivity and our work in the group, has as a main objectives the idea of sharing analysis and reflections with regards to the digital transformation in Mercosul to allow us and grant us with the possibility of analyzing, understanding the future, and also understanding the role of digital technologies in our context. We have been able to develop several different technologies in the past, and today we are happy to say that today and tomorrow at the same time, we will be talking about data production to measure policies that are based on internet. So, and those have the ideas of foster the exchange of technologies and knowledge with regards to alternative database. We also want to promote the exchange of regional experiences for the use, access, and appropriation of technologies that are available by companies that have their head offices in any of the countries that are Mercosul members. So we are preparing the path for in the coming December this year, the publication of documents that will give clarity to our integration with regards to the digital participation and integration in Mercosul, and also to provide help for the development of more technology and sciences in the countries that are members of the bloc. We understand that webinars and also publications with regards to the impact of new technologies and innovation and productivity and work in Mercosul is a sign of our commitment in Brazil for this global movement towards digital transformation of all governments, companies, and society as a whole. So this, with regards to Mercosul, this is our focus of this event. But it is also evident that our government in Brazil is dedicated on behalf, and principally the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and all the bodies in the government, that we are committed to this digital agenda in Latin America and Caribbean, like ECLAC, that provide support for the success of this event. And of course, for Brazil, the best results will be harvested only if we have total digitalization of all services without any hindrances that could or may appear in one or other country. So we have to be united. Therefore, we will be watching the development of a real digital market with no borders, integration of academic institutions with safe and reliable information exchange among all of us. So digital transformation will just bring good, positive things to all of us. Thank you very much, and I wish you all a good event. Now I'd like to pass the floor to Ana. Thank you very much, Luciana. So I do open with the seminar. I would like to invite Daniel Cavalcanti, who is the General Coordinator of the Ministry of Telecommunications in Brazil, and it is a great pleasure to count on your participation in this panel today. You have the floor. Please go ahead, Mr. Mancini.
Sí, me escuchan. Muchísimas gracias, Ana Laura.
Thank you very much, Ana Laura. Thank you very much for giving us the chance of sharing analysis, concepts, and reflections based on evidence with regards to digital transformation in Mercosul. Hopefully, we'll be able to analyze and understand the role of digital technologies and also open the path for a common development to all of us. And with that in mind, I would like to mention the excellent panel that we have today that will bring us a good light, shed light to all opportunities and trends and, of course, challenges that we might face ahead of us in the context of our agenda and the development works in the region, and especially in Mercosul in the region. And we would like to share our thoughts considering the context of each of the countries that are in the region. With that said, I would like to mention that our dynamic will be, first of all, an introduction by each of us, and then there will be a debate, questions, answers. We might also take some questions, of course, from those who are participating on this webinar. First of all, as a moderator, I would like to introduce a couple of words on how we can make advancements based on our public policies and operate in a positive way for this digital transformation. My presentation will be in Portuguese. Please feel free to decide and choose the language of your choice. Just remember to click on the globe at the bottom of your screen. Interpretation into Spanish, English, or Portuguese is the main floor.
Sí, espero que esté compartiendo la pantalla.
I wish you all can see my screen. Let us start with our point of view with regards to the scenario we have ahead of us. Initiatives in our public sector. How can we operate in this digital transformation?
The idea here is to coordinate a digital transformation strategy. That is a required step to guarantee inclusion so we can understand the society, the academia, to be able to design a strategy, a national strategy that will reflect digital transformation. That cannot be a static project, but rather dynamic, to guarantee that strategic digital transformation. With that, public digital transformation will allow the public power to make that available. Therefore, the public sector, academia, and the society as a whole will be able to carry out the digital transformation process. In addition to that, the public power should also carry out some analysis, digital transformation, to be able to verify, inspect the effectiveness of those actions in place. And moreover, we have to harmonize and to align specific indicators and metrics to our digital economy. And by that, I mean nationally, as those metrics and indicators, they have to be aligned to our domestic market, as well as to the international market, to allow coordination and integration, to guarantee a negotiation process in which each one of our countries are part of.
Muito bem. É importante reconhecer.
We also have to understand and acknowledge that digital transformation, we see that as an opportunity to improve productivity and competition. And by that, I mean in our own country or throughout the Mercosul. We all understand that productivity, technology, intensity, and income. If we see a productivity increase, that is fully correlated to an increase in technological intensity of the production structure that ultimately will be translated into a workers' revenue increase. Now let me illustrate the Brazilian digital transformation strategy. I will not get into details, but rather to give you some examples as how we translated that into facts. If we consider those different pillars, such as network infrastructures and access to ITCs, reliability to digital environment, and by that we mean cybersecurity, data privacy and data protection, education as a key element. We do need to encompass that since the very beginning of capacity building for those that are in the professional front line and international dimension. So we have to consider those 5 pillars, as well as the digital transformation axis, which we believe that will be able to cover our goals, which are to be able to encompass a new economy database. We'll be able to start to work on a IoT, Internet of Things, connected devices, which will affect and influence this digital process. We do need new business models to this new digital world. And last but not least important, our 4th transformation pillar, which is citizenship and digital governance. We do need to allow that transformation process and govern as a service provider to our society. And just to illustrate how Brazil has faced such a digital transformation. First of all, we do need to have a broadband framework. That network infrastructure is required to allow digital services, which will allow digital solution process to become available. And by that, I mean underwater cables, national backbones, and to allow that the backhaul of the backbone will be driven to all municipalities, allowing services to end users throughout fixed broadband, mobile, and where there are no other alternatives via satellites. And the key message is network infrastructures available to all is a key prerequirement to digital transformation.
I've already touched on the international dimension, so I wanted to tell you that our international coordination process has privileged 5 main mechanisms. I know that Not all of the Mercosul countries are members of the G20, but some of our countries are. This is an important level of coordination. Brazil is part of BRICS, so we are also in coordination with this group. The OECD, we are now part of the accession process, so they have a committee of digital economy with valuable information not only for OECD members, but also for the international community. And in a regional level, we've been working and creating new initiatives and reference documentation at ECLAC and at our group for the digital agenda in Mercosul. All of these coordination mechanisms foster negotiations. I would like to highlight one of these processes, which is common to all of the countries in the Mercosul. There's an ongoing negotiation for e-commerce at the World Trade Organization. If we can work in coordination, we'll be way more effective when it comes to this negotiation at the WTO. May that be when we negotiate and define priorities or when it comes to the ongoing negotiations. Let me give you one example. We're talking about digital products at the OECD. However, digital products is a concept that is not commonplace. We're talking about products per se, but we're also talking about services. So products and services, if these are considered as digital products, this will have a major impact to all of our processes. The government provides digital services, and that's what it's supposed to do. We have to provide digital services both for companies and individuals. We need to enable companies and individuals to interact with the government. Now, I wanted to talk about a data-based economy. Our policy for open data may enable the use of data not only for AI, but also for services that can be provided by the government and by startup companies, as well as other vendors under digital environment. We need to enable startups and new business models. You all know the startup company cycle. At first, many companies do not survive because of the valley of death. And at this point, we have to foster digital startup companies to potentiate their possibilities of raising funds in the open market. Another important front in Mercosul is considering small and medium-sized enterprises. All of these companies have to go digital. E-commerce is not only about selling products. There is a major infrastructure for data centers, marketplaces, payment methods, methodologies, and delivery logistics. So this is how transformative this can be, not only for the digital economy per se, but also for the real-life economy, if I can say that. Now, this is my last point. I know I'm out of time, but I wanted to talk about the Internet of Things. There is a major potential right here. This is true for all of the countries, but it is especially important for Mercosul. Let me tell you about smart farming and precision agriculture. In Mercosul, our countries are greatly competitive in agribusiness. If we are to keep taking this leading position, we have to go through the digital transformation process. On this slide, you see a map of Brazil, and in red, you see added value for agribusiness. So the darker the color, the more potential we have at these regions. Our network and communication infrastructure should reach our population, which is largely concentrated at the country's shore, but we also have to take it to the hinterlands. The use of drones, the use of different equipment and machines that connect data in real time is truly important. Now, weather forecast by making use of different devices is also pivotal. I'm not talking about the future. This is something that is a reality right now, and we have to keep an eye on that. Finally, I wanted to mention some indicators and metrics. These figures are very important. May they be domestically collected or data that is used from international institutions. This is valid for different sectors, for e-commerce, for cybersecurity, for broadband infrastructure, or even for open data policies. So we have to be mindful of that. Cetic does a great work in Brazil, and I'm sure we're ready to help the other countries in Mercosur. Thank you very much. I apologize for going out of time. And these were my initial remarks. Thank you. With that, I will hand the floor over to Spanish.
Once again, I would like to have the pleasure to introduce our panelists, and I use this time to say welcome to all. We have Sebastián de Elvira, who is from CEPAL. Sebastián Rovira will be the next, and then Jorge Abarge, who is the Vice President of Private Sector for the development of Latin America. We have also Mariana Ferreira. She is a National Director of the Ministry of Productive Knowledge in Argentina, and Davo Orlik from ECLAC in Slovenia, and Lucas Tadil Camara, who is the Executive Director of C4IR.br. C4IR de Brasil. And last but not least, Bernardo Díaz, a professor of the University of Buenos Aires in Argentina. Now, let us move on to the panel. I would like to pass the floor to Sebastián Rovira. We have from 6 to 8 minutes for your presentation. After your talk, we'll move on to Q&A. Thank you very much, Sebastián, and you have the floor. Danielle, thank you very much for your kind words and the introduction. I would like to say hi to all of you, Danielle, Alejandre, Mariana, and everybody else. I would like to thank CEPAL for the invitation, ECLAC for the invitation, and I would like to say a word of greetings to all members, panel members, and Jorge, Lucas, Davor, Mariana, Bernardo. So the idea is, as a matter of fact, conduct a very brief presentation and to give you highlights of what we have and what the scenario is today. So, of course, I would like to have more time to be able to discuss and exchange a great deal of information and try to understand how we can support or provide support with regards to the agenda in Mercosul.
Con Alejandro Patiño, donde tratamos de poner algunos temas relevantes, digamos, para el análisis, ¿no? Tiene que ver justamente con esta necesidad o este espacio que nos abre la transformación digital y cómo las nuevas tecnologías pueden impulsar indudablemente la innovación, la productividad y el trabajo, también pensando en el contexto que estamos, ¿no? Si bien nos parecía importante empezar con esto porque indudablemente América Latina y el Caribe ha sido una de las regiones más impactadas por el COVID-19. Algunos números, o sea, nosotros en CEPAL tenemos un observatorio sobre COVID-19 que analiza diferentes elementos digamos, vinculados a la pandemia. Y una cosa que llama mucho la atención es que la relación de muertes, digamos, en la región acumulamos casi un 27% de la mortalidad mundial, mientras que la población nuestra es de un 8,5% aproximadamente. Por lo tanto, esto lo que nos hace, nos pone en evidencia una serie de elementos de vulnerabilidades que tenemos en nuestros países que tienen que ver justamente con el sistema de salud, ni que hablar, pero también con otros elementos, otros factores que van en el ámbito económico y social y que hemos analizado en mucho detalle y en profundidad en muchos elementos, que tienen que ver Bueno, una de las cosas que hemos marcado, sobre todo un trabajo que hemos empezado ya hace unos años, sobre todo con la Comisión Europea y la OECD, que está relacionado con unas características que tienen nuestros países que nosotros los llamamos de desarrollo en transición. Es decir, nosotros estamos en economías que están en un proceso de transición al desarrollo, donde empiezan a desaparecer o empezamos a perder estos espacios de cooperación, de la cooperación internacional, pero al mismo tiempo no
international cooperation, and at the same time, we're not able to generate the basis for a more sustainable development. Even when we have some growth periods in the midterm, a pandemic starts or a crisis starts, and this has a major impact on the population, not only in terms of mortality, but also when we analyze what is going on in access to funding, social issues. We see a very important impact there. We have seen some improvements this year and 2022. We have some estimations for that. It's a kind of statistical rebound. We had a drop last year, and now we have a strong increase in this growth. However, this growth is going to face a different situation with more vulnerability. We're going to have a bigger indebtedness, less capacity to have some instruments and policies in place in order to support the economic development of the nations, to support healthcare, education, and other areas that are key. In that regard, it is more and more important, everything related to cooperation topics among the different countries. And the region that was important before the pandemic. After the pandemic, this is much more important. As Luciana said before, Daniel, we have regional, national scopes, but we have to understand how within the Mercosul, we have to start to capitalize on other areas, especially the digital. And this is very important, not only thinking in digitalization, because we want to have everyone connected, but also the implications in terms of creating jobs, added value to give possibility to people to have access to goods and services. We are in a region with major productivity problems. This is a gap that we have found in terms of traps or bumps to the development. We have found 4 bumps or traps. Number one, productivity, and this is closely related to low investments. We have to think in some strategic sectors that are able to support investments in our country. We need higher investments. We are investing only 19% of the GDP in other economies. We are speaking about 30% of GDP. We are investing less than developed economies that have already reached very high investment level. And this is a restriction for us. We are not able to increase productivity and to pay better wages and to distribute wealth in a different way. On the left, you can see the contribution of jobs and productivity. And in Latin American countries, the highest concentration is in
Perdón, podría concluir en un minuto.
Job generation. You have 1 more minute, Sebastian. This is not bad. We're increasing jobs, and that's good. But now, how are we increasing the job demand and at the same time productivity? This is related to how we produce. What's our specialties? The technologies that we have in place to produce. These are other indicators. I'm going to speak very fast. Daniel told me that I'm running out of time. We don't have very important technological diversification, low technology in different sectors, and we have to think how are we going to prepare ourselves for the future, speaking about IoT, advanced manufacturing, and also the technological maturity and how the companies are prepared for that. Digital technologies support all the production chains. We spoke about industrialization today. We have to speak about digitalization. As Daniel said before, digitalization has a major impact in agriculture, natural resources, services, industry, agriculture, etc. Some common drivers that are impacted by digital technologies and open space to generate this technology-based companies, such as startups. There are important initiatives in the region to support the smart manufacturing. Working in the private sector especially, we have three examples there. SENAI 4.0, the Centro Industria ex Argentina, or CAI in Uruguay. I'm almost done, Daniel. Smart manufacturing. This is an element that we should think about how the digital agenda Mercosul 4.0 could boost and advance. Includes these things. Number one, the different aspects that can enable this environment. This should be the base. Governance, institution, regulation, etc. And we have to take into account specific actions to support that. And these are some examples: access to providers or suppliers, adoption, smart production, among others. And this is the final slide. Some key elements to consider in this digital agenda with impact. Number one, a clear leadership with clear definition of roles and competencies. Every nation should know, every institution should know what they are supposed to do. We have to prioritize to have a clear diagnosis of the offers, demands, and incentives in order to support or develop this sector. Reliability in technology, etc., etc. You can take a look at this in more detail later on. These are some documents, some inputs you can take a look at to explain these factors. But we can open up for questions and answers, and I'm sorry that I exceeded my time. Thank you so much, Sebastian. Now I give the floor to Arbache. Jorge Arbache is the Vice President of Private Sector at CAF. Thank you so much, Daniel. Greetings to everyone. I'd like to thank you for the invitation, Alexandre, Luciana.
Panelistas e a todos os presentes. Arranco hablando muy rápidamente de que CAF.
I want to speak about CAF and what we have done in this agenda. I'd like to highlight a couple of things. We have the project Internet for All in Peru, Internet para Todos, with a coverage in rural areas of the country. We are developing the very same project in Colombia, the submarine cable in Chile. It is going to increase the capacity in the region, between the region and Asia. Digitalization of SMBs, it's a very ambitious project. We're working in another project with e-government, support to investment funds that invest in startups. They are developing new solutions, even for areas such as education, healthcare, support to fintechs, especially those that provide credit to SMBs, digitalization of micro financial companies, and development of indicators of digitalization. I understand that this talk should be focused on a more theoretical or conceptual point of view. I'd like to speak about the region, how the snapshot looks like. We take into account this kind of indicators that we developed at CAF for digitalization among other available indicators. The region is not that bad. Many elements show space to improve, of course, room to improve, but we're not behind as other regions are. When we take into account Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay, we're not among the worst cases in Latin America. Quite the opposite. Those three countries have a reasonable, comfortable position. Where are we when we take into account things such as access to cell phones, coverage, and bandwidth? We're not doing bad. We're developing this at a two-digit pace. Many other indicators also evolve. There is a topic that is important to discuss public policies looking forward. And that is, things seem to look good, but how about well-being, productivity, and other elements? Of course, there are many factors that have an impact on those areas. It is important to identify the difference between relative and absolute benefits of the digital economy. Absolute benefits are those benefits that you receive just for having access to a cell phone or a computer connected to the internet. But more important are the relative benefits. What you can do, what a company can do with that access to the internet. What is going on today? There is a fact, very important. The digital transformation, when we take a look at the jungle, at the forest, we realize that many people, including SMBs, have access to digital economy by using their cell phones or other means. Prices of robots, for example, and other gadgets or devices, digital devices, the prices are coming down on a daily basis, on a yearly basis, and that widens, expands the access to those devices. If there is a digital commonization or popularization of the access, why do we have that risk or that perception of risk? The gaps between more developed regions and developing regions are growing. The gaps are increasing not only between those regions, but also within the countries, within the region. There is an important topic for this thought. What can you do with those technologies? Something is to have an access, and a different thing is to use those technologies to develop things such as research and development, or to increase productive capabilities, productivity, and even competitiveness. That's important. Taking into account that having access is not enough, the fact is, what do you do with those technologies? And even more important, the difference between having access to those technologies and to develop new technologies, to be able to develop new technologies. That's a very important gap. What's the functional contribution of the different countries to digital economy? In a few words, in a nutshell, it's some countries in the region, even within Mercosur, have access to many technologies, but that does not suffice, because those technologies are commoditized. They're very popular. It's important to be in condition to develop the digital economy by using those technologies by means of platforms, new services. That is going to put our countries and our companies in condition to get relative benefits, much more than others that are consumers of those technologies. Please, 1 minute.
I appreciate if you could conclude your talk right now. Thank you.
We have two important challenges. One challenge is to take into account public and private policies that are going to keep the companies in the region at the same pace of the technological development. But it is important to look for more important relative benefits, and we have to focus on regions where we have more dynamics, where we can develop new technologies and business models in sectors where we didn't have those technologies. It is possible that our region is in condition to add, to contribute something to this discussion. I would highlight, among others, areas such as agriculture, mining, forests, water, manufacturing industries, everything related to climate changes. We are in conditions to be part of the solution, not only demand of technologies to mitigate and adapt, and solutions for areas, development areas such as popular finance, solution for popular housing, etc. This should be part of a more ambitious agenda where the region can get more relative benefits that are so important. That would be all for now. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jorge, George. Now, in the panel, I have the pleasure to invite Mariana Ferreira. She's the National Director of the Ministry of Productive Development in Argentina. She works for the development of information society. Mariana, you have the floor, please. Go ahead. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you for the invitation. Thank you to Cetic, CEPAL, and the Brazilian government for this initiative, for putting together these webinars, these meetings. I agree with Luciana when she said that these are part of strengthening the digital integration within the bloc and also at regional and international levels. I'm going to make a presentation. Please allow me to share my screen. I'm going to share with you what Argentina is doing in terms of digital technologies as public policies. I'm going to be a little repetitive because I am going to repeat some things that were already mentioned. I totally agree with Luciana. First of all, I was a director of the Mercosul from the Ministry of Productive Development, and I agree with her when she said that we provide more importance to tariffs and custom taxes. And in the last couple of years, we have this demand that we have to embed, we have to include science and technologies to those services, as Daniel said before as well. Okay, can you see my screen? Okay, this is some information about digitalization and the general overview. As Daniel said, we're part of the G20. We're working a lot in everything related to digital economy. Highlighting the webinar for tomorrow, there is something very important that we have to consider to design and redesign public policies that have an effective application in the economy is precisely the measurement of data of the digital economy. So thank you for the webinar tomorrow, and I urge you to be present. During the pandemic, we have seen an increase in online activities, over 35% of the growth of the bandwidth at international level in 2020. The infrastructure was key for that. The data flow is going to triple by next year. Growing importance of data such as economic and strategic resource. That's very important, and I wanted to highlight it. In the region, we don't have indicators that locate us in international or global in performance rankings. Google, Microsoft, Facebook are the main purchasers of new companies of AI between 2016 and 2020. Those platforms are investing more and more in all the throughout the value chain of the data. UNCTAD proposes the formation of a new coordination body of the United Nations focused on evaluation and development of a global digital and data governance. In that regard, in that sense, we have to be part of this sector that is so important at global level. One public policy that we have in Argentina, one of the most important policies, started in 2004 and until 2019. We have a law to promote the software industry. The sector positioned as the second block exporting after the soybean industry. So it is very important the participation of a service and trade or commerce is led by this sector in Argentina. After that, or later on, I'm going to give you some important data. The main goal is to be focused on digitalization process as a public policy, with a primary goal to strengthen the industry by supporting qualified jobs, export knowledge, investing in R&D and quality certification. That act was valid for 15 years with two important benefits. Fiscal bonus for 70% of the social burden and job generation and reduction of 60% of reduction of the gain taxes. Of course, with the fiscal stability, that was an act or a long-term act or law with a horizon of follow-up by the state or this industry in order to embed research and development to services and goods. Important numbers, over 500 business benefited with that law. Over 82 million jobs were created, among other benefits. The exports grew almost sixfold from 300 million in 2006 to 1.8 billion in 2019. Jobs, 47,000 in 2006 to 1,100,000 in 2019. And companies grew. Businesses from 3,200 in 2006 to 5,400 in 2019. That was part not only of this act, but the follow-up of the state in many of these small businesses. We were able to provide support. The state was present in that industry to support those companies. Mariana, I'm sorry. You have 2 more minutes. Thank you, Daniel. Out of this law, we also have the law of the knowledge economy that was signed by in 2020. The objectives are the same. not only software, however, we added other activities that apply the use of digitalization of information and knowledge for goods and services. And of course, to widen the fan of activities, the spectrum of activities, softwares, and also export professional services, biotechnology, aerospatial, nuclear engineering, biological and geological services, among other industries. Main benefits are the same. And of course, we have over 600 requests, almost 200 businesses enrolled, and over 15 employees, and 580 million of exports that were promoted. Of course, we expect to have an increase in exports. Argentina depends on hard currency. We expect to increase jobs, investments in R&D. This point is very important for this industry. Public-private partnerships for technological developments, public-private partnerships for capacity building. As Daniel said before, capacity building or training is very important to support the growth that we're having with those benefits, to attract investments, access to labor market, to include all the states in this project to increase competitiveness and productivity of the economy as a whole. And bottom line, this is going to improve the well-being of the society as a whole. Just 1 second, another public policy that is very important in capacity building. This is the plan that we have in Argentina. It is called Plan Argentina Programa, to increase training in programming. We have a center for that. We are working in human resources as drivers of processes and products. We want to increase the stock of human capital to generate new jobs, etc. We need to expand our borders of production, and this is a key industry, training and technology in production processes in order to transform the productive matrix to increase value and productivity. I was fast, but thank you so much for your attention. Thank you, Mariana. Now, I'd like to give the floor to Davor Orlic. He's Chief Operating Officer of the International Research Center for Artificial Intelligence, ECLAC, from Slovenia. It's a pleasure, Davor, to welcome you. You have the floor. Thank you so much.
Pleasure is mine. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, nice. So while thinking of this presentation, first we wanted to present a technology for smart cities, then a technology for water management. Then we changed our opinion, then we wanted to show technology for education. But then we decided to do something different and just talk about two very specific key points that we feel are very important in the idea of digital transformation, and which are also sort of like state-of-the-art in artificial intelligence. So the idea of the monitoring of AI trends in the labor market and human-centered AI systems. So for those of you who don't know, ECLAC is an AI center under the auspices of UNESCO. So it works closely with ITU, OECD, UNESCO headquarters, and the European Commission on AI-related topics. And it tries to use AI for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And as you can imagine, all the SDGs broadly essentially converge or are based on the idea of human capital, basically, and human resources. And AI converges on the idea of digitization. So no digitization, no AI. So the digital transformation is just the basis for using AI large scale. So from whichever perspective we look at things, humans are at the core of SDG, or humans in the AI parlance. And most likely digital innovations in AI are there to make the lives of those humans possible, or at least make them better. So therefore, IRCAI is mainly interested in measuring the SDGs with artificial intelligence in order to understand how progress goes. And I think this was mentioned also by the other speakers. So where has poverty diminished? Have forests been decarbonized or carbonized? How did water management change in a city, region, country, and how can we compare that with other countries to have a full picture, and et cetera, et cetera. So, and that can prove to create the basis or even a marketplace for new investment opportunities. For example, think of social impact bonds that can be used for funding AI services, and social impact bonds are something that IRCAI is interested in as a mechanism for governments to fund innovation and ultimately deliver, in this sense, new jobs rather than take job away, which is one of the big skepticisms around AI. So to steal jobs rather than make jobs. So it's absolutely important to understand that AI innovation will shape the future of the labor market and productivity and work in many ways, unpredictable and predictable ways. So we think a good vehicle for this to happen can be through fundamental research in AI and applicational research of AI. Obviously interdisciplinary and across all continents, and delivered via an international network of AI centers of excellence. And we've been discussing about this with our colleagues in Brazil, and we think it's an exciting idea. But specifically for that purpose, IRCAI is building the network to understand what is literally going on, who does what, and what types of problems are being addressed and solved across different research groups, startups, policy labs in the world, across the world, in terms of AI and development, but specifically on the topic of or baselined by the digital transformation. So having said that, in terms of AI and new technologies, innovations, and specifically for productivity and work, at IRCAI, we have been asking ourselves two questions. Can we technically monitor the journey of an innovation? Obviously, once the digital transformation is done and delivered, so can we understand the timeline of innovations, where they are coming from, what's happening, how they influence business, how they influence the job market, how they are being influenced by education, media, and ultimately policy? And the answer, interestingly enough, is yes. So we do have that technology to understanding innovation and its life cycle. And the other one is, can we work towards incentivizing innovations to have a humane or a human-centered approach in AI? So demystifying machines and just using them for the benefits of the end users, the citizens, the taxpayers, so to speak. So the answer for that one is we don't know, but we hope so. One of the research topics that we are looking at is trying to understand and answer that.
Could I just ask you to wrap up in 1 or 2 minutes, please?
Definitely. Basically, what we've been thinking is, should we first understand the trends in AI and the labor market, and how can we hopefully shape them to the benefit of citizens? And ultimately, the idea is, can we do this through international collaboration rather than separate entities and institutions and so on?
So, entonces, gracias a Davor por esta presentación.
Davos, thank you very much for your presentation. A request from the organization is, please do open your cameras now. We are on YouTube at this point in time, so please do open your cameras. Next, we'll be listening to Lucas Câmara, his executive director of C4IR. He's connecting from Brazil. I'll pass the floor to Lucas. Please allow me to remind you that you have 5 to 6 minutes. You have the floor now, Lucas.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Thank you to the Ministry of External or Foreign Affairs of Brazil and the Center for Development of Scientific Information. Thank you for this invitation. Thank you for having me. Greetings to Daniel Cavalcante and greetings to all the officials that are part of this panel. It's my pleasure to partake this meeting. Mercosul is now celebrating 30 years of the Asunción Treaty. Argentina, Paraguay, Brazil were bold enough to sign this treaty. And this treaty was signed, and Mercosul was created because of reasons that still stand nowadays. So thank you for helping us delve into this strategic partnership. This is an essential pillar for foreign affairs of member countries. I'm here on behalf of C4IR, that's the Center for Fourth Industrial Revolution in Brazil. This is a public-private partnership between the federal government of Brazil, the government of the state of São Paulo, and a few companies, amongst which the Brazilian Association for Healthcare Technologies, AstraZeneca, Brascell, Electrobras, Facebook, and Qualcomm. It's important to say that C4IR is part of a global network of centers for the fourth industrial revolution of the Global Economic Forum created by Professor Schwab in the US. The goal here is to fast-track the adoption of technologies for the fourth industrial revolution. We want to leverage the benefits and mitigate risks. We're now present in 13 countries, amongst which South Africa, Israel, Japan, and Norway, just to give you an idea of our footprint. Now let me set the stage. The first industrial revolution is usually associated to steam engines. The second industrial revolution is related to the automotive industry and electricity. The third industrial revolution is connected to computer and electronics. Now, over the past years, the fourth industrial revolution has been closely associated with the exponential digitization process, connectivity, and data-intensive processes. It's quite particular. I mean, this revolution has been going faster as compared to the previous ones, and very few countries and very few companies and very few people have concentrated power in their hands. There's another important aspect to it. The fourth industrial revolution makes us see technology not as a sheer tool, as it's always been. This revolution now changed the way our society is organized, and it changes our idea on what human beings are. These new technologies are now expanding the frontiers between the physical, biological, and technological world. Amazing things are going about in the world, and we see actions that are controlled by our thought. We see genetic therapies that are tailor-made. That's what we see in precision medicine. Activists now say that it's no longer enough to advocate for freedom of expression. We have to advocate for the freedom of thought. And you can see how impactful these technologies are, considering neuroscience and tech power. As Mr. Diamantes says, the future is going faster than we think. Our global network at C4IR handles exactly those type of challenges. We have practical, hands-on projects that help us draw a global map on how to adopt these technologies with accountability. Every human being has to potentially reap the benefits of these technologies. In the global south and in South America, if we are to be part of the fourth industrial revolution, we have to work closely with each other. These innovations can certainly contribute to an increase in productivity for our society. But if we don't invest in people or in local technologies, we'll still be stuck in the old dilemma. Should we increase productivity and adopt technologies? Will we lose jobs because of that? Will there be an impact of such technologies? That's what CEPAL has been discussing. So CEPAL and the world has been at a crossroads. Never before have we had so much computational capability. Many jobs will vanish. We have to consider that. Some jobs have already disappeared. Now, how can we make good use of such innovations, and how can we not lose our social consistency? As we look at the best practices on a global level, what we see is that countries that are doing better are strongly acting so as to train their professionals to create a foundation for the workforce, and they're truly changing the programs and contents of courses for young people who are going to be part of the workforce in the future. Can you please conclude, sir? Sure. Now, I wanted to reflect upon another topic. I think we should talk about this issue not from a linear perspective. We shouldn't try to recover time we wasted. We have to think of strategy so that we can grow exponentially. I also would like to talk about continuity. We should act together in the international scenario. We should have standards for these new technologies, and we have to come up with joint projects that are truly bold and ambitious so we can test this regulatory harmonization. Think of autonomous vehicles that are crossing borders. International initiatives do not really consider our particularities and the social reality of our society and our roads. So when autonomous vehicles are available, they won't be easily adapted to our region because we do not really have an appropriate data set for such. So we should move forward in such discussions that can be truly helpful so that we can act in an integrated fashion in international negotiations that can also help us frame these new technologies and understand how they will impact our economies and societies. With that, I will hand the floor over back to the moderator. Thank you for this opportunity. It was a pleasure to share these initial remarks with you, and I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Lucas.
Lucas, thank you so much for your words. Now I would like to invite Bernardo Díaz. He is a professor at the University of Buenos Aires in Argentina. He will be talking about his experience. Yeah, I'm sure that he has quite a lot of experience in this kind of webinar. He's always very able to summarize all his ideas. So I'd like to pass the floor to Bernardo. Daniel, thank you very much. And thank you very much for this invitation. And also, I would like to say hi to all my panel members. And it is a very an honor to me to share this panel with my colleagues. Well, as a matter of fact, we would like to say that our work and our ideas are aligned with what Luciana mentioned at the very beginning, and also the new action or the new blueprint. We are focused on total integration in the region. So now talking about integration in Mercosul, how can we increase our participation in the world as a whole? And with this integration, of course, this should always be positive with regards to the digital technologies and the improvement, of course, to improve the productivity of our companies and also help companies with their difficulties with regards to technology when they want to step up and go to international scenario. And of course, from us in the academy, we are still discussing since the 80s how we can just make the best of this digital transformation in our countries. And we don't want that to be stuck. When we see that the exports are stuck and then they cannot take steps ahead, so we try to increase our participation in the region and also not on the national, and we try to find out what is missing for us to be able to transform really the world and this options that we have to make the best and improve our productivity, for example. And of course, we depend on complementary investments from the countries of our governments for us not only to just adopt new technologies that are available right now, but also to be aligned with what is happening across the region. It is important to see how much is used and for what reason they are using it. So the use of technology is extremely important, and it is affecting us all the time with regards to productivity, for us to sort out what it is happening in all countries. So I would like to just focus on two types of complementary investments, so that is at corporate level and government level. Corporate level, it is important that countries not only focus on tools, digital tools, but also in-house projects in each corporation, in each company. Of course, education is totally related to that. If we don't focus on how to drop barriers and hurdles with regards to technology, so it is like going in circles. We also have to consider that it is extremely important to have human resources. So education is a problem, and this is a problem in our country. So how can we make the most of what we have and also get rid of the issue that we have with regards to human resources, education? So we have to, you cannot just provide technology and if people cannot understand and how to use it. And so we have to give priority to all those processes in terms of digital education. With regards to the governments in our countries, and the government should work in an integrated and way, so to understand where the gaps are, so that all the countries developed towards the same direction. Of course, complementary is technology in the private sector and the public sector. So many companies are just trying to work on the digital industry, but they have to just make sure that the public sector is compatible to the technology that they have decided to adopt. So this is important by means of documentation. And for example, when they have to or they want to export some product and then they have to go back to paper work because there's no technology available or compatible to what they had decided in the past. So it is important to consider this communication and this information. National portals have to be linked and connected. So in other words, this digital transformation has to consider public and private sectors in conjunction. And it is a very specific point that I would like to mention. How to improve that? We should think about the indicators in the region. For example, the receptivity of digital commerce. For example, Argentina and Brazil are strong countries with the worst indicators, principally with regards to services. And the indicators and the reliability of those indicators with regards to the international market. So we have to consider that. In Brazil, this is one of the countries, for example, the indicators in Brazil compared to what we have in the rest of the world, so it's very bad. And compared to countries such as Costa Rica and Dominican Republic. So you see, this is the problem. And there are so many options in terms of technologies in this sense. So how to help the information, how to help small and medium companies to receive information. Companies have to have an incentive to adopt certain level technology so that when they are ready to export their product, they do not have to make other investments to be compatible to the public sector. So in other words, effectively, companies can see that their income would be affected if they are not fast enough. I wouldn't like to extend too much my presentation, but I would like just to mention one example, Uruguay. In the case of Uruguay, they are following the steps of Brazil, so to understand what happens from one side of the border and the other side of the border, so that the countries can pass information to the private sector. Many times you just realize that there is a lack of connection when you are there in the last minute. So, and then they have to return the product that was meant to be exported just because of some sort of red tape, and of course the increase of frustration of the business people or the corporate because of those problems. So we have to get connected, in other words. We have to focus not only on the digital tools, but also in the technologies that are available and how complementary they could be. Many things are not tangible and they are difficult to measure. So it is important for us to discuss that, to be able to incorporate a blueprint for the region and for our digital agenda for the coming years. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much. Those are our presentations. Now I would like to invite you all to a Q&A session. And the goal from this point in time on is to do it fast so that everybody can participate. And I would like to mention that I already have some quite intriguing and motivating questions that are, as a matter of fact, aligned with the comments and with the presentations. So how could we suggest concrete actions to allow a better integration in our region, in Mercosul, with regards to the topics discussed? Please feel free to add your questions if you wish, but there are three initial questions. What do you think is the most important fact for our industrial and policies in our Mercosur? Second, how can we coordinate policies to make those transformations viable and feasible? So, in other words, in what sectors could that happen in the shortest way, according to your opinion? And do you have any recommendation for us to be able to strengthen our work in the region? Volunteers? Maybe the same sequence as before? I think Sebastian mentioned with a sign of hand that he is a volunteer. He's volunteering to answer the first or to start this discussion. Thank you very much, Sebastian. No, thank you. Very quickly, just to allow my colleagues to say something too. I do believe that there are some elements that are more that go across. Of course, each of the countries have their own agendas, digital agendas, and there are so many things that are related to their interests, and of course the small and medium companies and how they deal with them. Of course, they are very important issues. Nevertheless, it is important to consider that in our regional agenda, we have to consider the Mercosur strategy. We have to think, why do we have a digital agenda in our framework? One of the things that is related, as Lucas mentioned, is our position to have that sub-region or region and our global. So we have to have a common voice, one voice, so that we can make headway in a common way, in a united way for our development, the development and digital transformation that we wish to have. This is one of the most important elements that I would like to highlight. And with regards to trade, of course, there is an incredible potential ahead of us. But we cannot, or we should not be just thinking about trade, commerce. We have to think of strategies, some other sectors that really need our cooperation, a digital agenda in Uruguay or Paraguay or Argentina. So they cannot develop solutions, technological solutions by themselves. And just to be dealing with advanced manufacturing. And so these are things that we have to think in group. So we have to just be complementary one to one another. Create and not only digitalize the small and medium companies by ourselves. We have to think on how to create a new environment. We have to think basically in terms of doing things together. Otherwise, we will be stepping backwards. We have to consider our different capacities and capabilities. Of course, we have to consider our differences, but we have to consider that we have things to contribute with, and we have to just get united. There are so many countries that have those companies that need some help, some push. So how to do that? By means of a uniting and give a push. We have to think that we consider the possibility of generating space to Uruguay, Argentina, and other countries so that we work together. I agree with you, Sebastian, Daniel says. Let us think on how, for example, as Davor said, the use of applications, solutions, energy. There's so much space for digital technological development, but how here as a region, how we can generate all that together. Sebastian, thank you so much for your input. I would like to pass the floor now to Bernardo, who is with us. Perhaps he could tell us a little bit about it. Well, Bernardo, as a matter of fact, first I would like to thank you for your participation. Let me ask you one thing. Do you have any final input for that, with that matter? Well, thank you very much. I wanted actually to mention that before. And as Sebastian said, we should think in terms of strategy in our actions here in Mercosul. We cannot just be going in different directions. Otherwise, we just stumble all the time. So we just, as we stand on our feet, we trip and fall again. So we have to go together, as Sebastian said. Thinking about strategy, well, I'm not sure about thinking in terms of sectors. As a matter of fact, when our countries are aligned in terms of their regulatory framework, and then the companies can just go free from one region to the other and in equal terms, I think that would be great. But I still think that there is we are still stepping backwards in terms of when we compare to the other countries in the region. So basically, we are not giving full chance to the companies to make the most of this digital transformation. So yes, there is room for us to think in terms of different strategies and how to combine all our energies in a positive way in one sole direction. But as a matter of fact, how we in the region could compete with other regions, this is something that we have to consider as well. Well, of course, when we think about cost, technology cost, it will drop. The important thing here now is that how our countries here in the region can coordinate in harmony to make headway and make the most of this technology to optimize the regulatory framework. So I think that it is important for us to compare to what we had in the past in terms of agreements. And the Pacific region, why didn't they reach us here in this Mercosul? So there are certain things that weren't discussed in the past, like 4 or 5 years, and because of the ethics or because so many other issues, but they are basic things that we have to consider. And there are other regions that are making so much more headway and faster than us. We have to consider that the companies have to count on a more friendly environment, so to be able to increase their input, to increase their income, and to receive incentives. So those are the points that I think are important.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Bernardo, for your participation. And I think you have said something very important, and that is how the digital transformation can advance in those areas where the region has some competitive advantages. That's very important. Once again, any volunteers to answer that question that I asked before? Lucas, your turn.
Thank you, Daniel. I would like to make a brief comment regarding what my colleague Sebastian and Bernardo just said, and also regarding your initial presentation. Let me set a parallel about what artificial intelligence regulatory status is taking place. In Europe, we have a longer process, several hearing processes, and also in Brazil, we have been discussing at what extent the regulatory process, the civil market, that is so complex. We cannot handle that immediately. It takes several steps to reach a conclusion. What people have been doing throughout the world is to test into practical terms what we have been doing. Any innovative process, it has to go through some error process, and we have to learn from our mistakes. We have not been done much jointly, especially in some strategic areas such as agribusiness, which takes our block as being seen as a very relevant part of the globe. And we see an opportunity to develop, to advance, and not to lose our competitive advantages. However, the risk to stick into that agenda and to run towards what we have lost, or to go or to choose for those ready recipes, those that we can just take out from the shelf, differently from what we had in the past, that goes through a turning point. There is a time that you end up losing. Those who are outside, they will reach a much greater database. And there is an analogy which says artificial intelligence requires a huge database, whereas blockchain is a technology which allows freedom, is libertary. You are able to reach leadership thanks to few strategic areas, and that is ultimately our goal. We may reach leadership thanks to a strategic vision. Otherwise, we won't be able to reach the same levels as other regions in the globe, especially the Asian countries, which are doing really well in comparison to Western countries. So there is no other way to have that very simplistic idea. We have to digitalize and to allow access to the great majority, but in a very strategic perspective, such as agribusiness, which is a comparative aspect that we have in our favor. Thank you, Lucas. Very timely and relevant comments that you made.
Now, what you said, Lucas, thank you so much. We have an expert in this panel. So,
Davor, can you hear me? So these last comments are squarely in your area of specialty artificial intelligence. And some of the points raised regard the fact that you require a tremendous amount of data to have the benefits of artificial intelligence. And the question further than that is, how can we apply effectively these new technologies in a regional bloc such as Mercosul, with its own challenges, but also with areas in which we have comparative advantages globally, whether these should be the priority or the entirely novel areas. You mentioned at some point smart cities and autonomous vehicles. One of the other interventions of colleagues here has mentioned that there is a challenge of autonomous vehicles in our region due to the reality of roads and highways. So maybe that's a chance for you to pitch in here and tell us from your perspective, what could be regional priorities for investing in artificial intelligence and coordinating among Mercosul blocks on this issue of artificial intelligence. So you have the floor.
I think the interesting thing would be, rather than think of which bridge where, would be to agree on an experimental sandbox, right? So agree on a regulatory sandbox where a couple of players, stakeholders, whether this is countries or institutions or universities or companies, would be allowed to test, deploy, implement, and then come back and say, this is what we've learned. And I think this is the easiest thing. It's a policy context that would allow researchers and everyone to have like a carte blanche to try and test things without worrying that things might go wrong. I mean, very, very simple idea, a regulatory sandbox that would allow one drone to go from one country to the other for a very, very specific reason, because the two towns have something shared in between or whatever, a problem that they're sharing, which usually is, if you downgrade, basically a sustainable development problem or a problem in a region. So as long as people benefit from that, then that's good enough to test technologies. And then what the outcome is, understanding new business models, basically, right? So thinking about sandbox and thinking about bridges in between research groups and industries first and foremost, and then go for the big long haul and cooperations and stuff.
Very good, thank you. Gracias. Pregunto si Jorge o Mariana gustarían de...
Now, George and Mariana, could you like to say anything about this?
Daniel.
Sim, Jorge, por favor. Please go ahead.
No, muchas gracias.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the questions. Someone spoke about the importance of the regulatory frameworks that should be standardized. This is very important. This is key for this kind of discussion, which is the critical mass, the capital flow, physical capital, human capital, financial capital within the region. That's very important. And this critical mass, this more dynamic context is absolutely important to negotiate at international level, especially with blocs that have a clear perspective, such as the EU, of course, the United States, China, with its own policies, Japan. And we could move forward when there is a more dynamic and strong private sector with capability for R&D. We have to take into account the decision between a contribution of new technologies, digital technologies and productivities, and on the other hand, how this contribute or help for competitiveness. If you are going to use digital technologies, including AI, that are already commodities, that are popular, so to speak, the highest you are going to gain is going to be an increased productivity, but not competitiveness. Your product is not going to be competitive because not because you are using e-commerce, just because you are using the same AI used by other competitors. So that's why it is so important to seek relative benefits and not absolute benefits of digital technologies. So where do we have these marginal benefits by using or adopting advanced technologies? In some areas, we have some comparative advantages that are extraordinary, and that was mentioned before. And I agree with that. For each dollar invested in capacity building, R&D, and use of AI, in some sectors, those investments are higher than in other industries. What we really need is to reduce the gaps within the region and between our region and more advanced region. And that's why we have to look for a bigger relative benefits and not absolute benefit. Because you can use a cell phone or any platform. That is an absolute benefit, but not a relative benefit. So it seems to me that there is some room to develop this strategy and a clear vision or where to invest. And at the same time, to follow the same pace of the expansion of different technologies and how people and companies have access to them. But we have to combine both strategies. Okay, thank you, Jorge. Now, Mariana. And if you allow me, Mariana, I'd like to add another question from the attendees, and it is related to the Argentinian context. With the adoption of AI in productive sectors or industries, there is a demand for specialized professionals. The question is, do you have in Argentina some policies to develop those specific skills? Mariana, you have the floor. Thank you so much, Daniel. Yes, that was the last slide that I presented. Argentina made a study about the skills that are going to be required in the next 10 years, and we have worked with the private sector in order to find those capacity building lines that are not offered by the formal education, but it is going to offer in the future because of the demand. Right now, this is not included in the curricula. However, a good way, and coming back to the previous discussion, to adopt a policy that can help to the integration of Mercosul is exactly that, to identify the starting point. How is each member nation, what policies do we have implemented? That's why we are fostering this kind of webinars that provide this information. And we, as a collective, can identify, well, we have in Argentina these public policies. In Brazil, we have those policies. Paraguay, Uruguay, the same. And based on that, we can try that study about skills, for example, that are going to be required by the private sector could be a Mercosul policy. But there is a lack of information, especially about regulation frameworks or the laws I don't know if all the countries are aware of that. I don't know if in every country there is something similar to that law that we have in Argentina. So we have a point in time that we have to start identifying the public policies implemented to understand the information from each country, and based on that we can go to other blocs, for example the Alliance for the Pacific or the EU. I was involved in the negotiation of the agreement between Mercosur and EU, and they have a perspective that is absolutely different of integration in all the industries, not only in digital integration. So we have to learn from those developed blocs because they can show us the way, because they are in a different level, in a higher level. And Mercosur needs not only digital integration, but also an insertion in the world that allow us to adopt this kind of policy, especially in the private sector, to help digitalization. A strategic industry that I thought about is healthcare, for example. Considering the pandemic, the digitalization of the healthcare industry in Argentina, and I know this is the case in Brazil, foreign investments in clinical trials is key because of the talent of our human resources, because of the size of the population, because this is a very interesting marketplace for clinical trials by pharmaceutical labs, but sometimes they have this obstacle that we don't have CRF. It is important to have a common policy so that the Mercosur as a bloc is a hub to attract foreign investments in those industries. This is key. This is key in order to expand the production possibilities. Thank you, Mariana. So I can summarize everything, but before that, we have two hands raised. Please try to be as concise as possible. Sebastian, please. Yes, a very minimalist, very concise. Regarding industries, as Lucas said, not only agribusiness, but also foodstuff industry should be an industry where we could think in some digital technologies and solutions to support that industry. The same goes for energy. That's a very relevant industry. There is something I'd like to highlight, as Mariana said. We should understand how we are prepared within the Mercosur in the different industries, but we have to understand where we want to go. If we are thinking about our behavior or where we are going to be looking back, trying to get back the lost time, the wasted time. And I was speaking about comparative advantages, okay, but which competitive advantages, dynamic advantages we want to have in place? Yes, of course, we need to take into account comparative advantages as country, as a bloc, but we have to use the bloc in order to generate something different, and this is not happening, and it hasn't happened for many years. We should be critical. We have to consider how to use the bloc to position different things and not speak only about tariff or custom taxes. No, we have to think about new things. For example, scale economy to generate this critical mass that we don't have today. Thank you, Sebastian. Lucas, your turn now.
Well, I'm going to be brief as well. The concept of AI, artificial intelligence, is used randomly sometimes. 95% of the times people are talking about AI, they're not actually talking about AI. They're talking about simple automation and algorithms. So I believe we should be mindful of these concept. Both agendas are important. On the one hand, we've got productivity and how to improve our business environment, but we also can't lose sight of the strategic perspective on the use of AI. For that, as I mentioned before, and as Mr. George said, we need a critical mass of people who are capable of thinking about those issues. Our main researchers leave our countries. We need them to be interested in staying in our countries, not only from a technical standpoint, but also from a strategic standpoint. We need leaders from the private sector. Many of them are not aware of the benefits of such initiatives. Brazil and other countries of our region have been implementing a few initiatives, but they are too few initiatives. Now, the private sector is the sector that can carry out those initiatives, but this sector needs support because of that issues. We also have to take an institutional approach. Here we work under the civil law system. There is a lot of red tape. We have issues with institutional affairs, and we have to be more ambitious. We have to be bolder in terms of regulatory affairs. We have to start testing these initiatives, such as what is done in developed countries. That's how we'll be able to retain our best talents, people who will test innovative initiatives, and regulating institutions will be then able to learn from them and create appropriate regulations. Sometimes regulations are created before the concrete action takes place. These initiatives are very important. We need a regulatory sandbox. And that is also valid for our regional level. We can't work independently. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all the attendees. I'd like to summarize the summary. We can affirm that we have to choose priorities. We should prioritize those industries where we have comparative advantages and to identify potential competitive advantages. That's a consensus. Number two, there is a deficit of skills and competences that we need to focus on. Each member state know its own challenges, and they're addressing those challenges with actions, with strategies, etc. The challenge that we're mentioning here is a regional challenge. Something that we can propose is putting together institutions or mechanisms similar to those in the EU. That is to set some competence and specialty centers with a regional perspective and not only a national perspective. With that, all the state nations can contribute with their competencies to those centers that will be able to generate outcomes, results for the whole region and not only for each country. This could be a way. Just to highlight a couple of topics of regulatory sandboxes. In Brazil, for example, we are evolving at national level, but each country will have to implement those sandboxes in each country, but we need to have regional sandboxes that could be applicable to the whole block. We have very effective sandboxes in Brazil in the financial industry. The fintechs are advancing because the regulatory framework has sandboxes that allow them to be more flexible. They are not subject to the rules of banks and other financial institutions. This model can be reproduced, but we need more people involved in the analysis and creation of those sandboxes. That was just an example. AI, the same. Each country is creating national AI centers, but how can they cooperate? And we don't need one single center. The solution of center network is also feasible. The costs are not very high. We don't need professionals to travel to other places. They can cooperate in those networks. But the concept behind that in a center, one specific topic has been researched, creating that specialization. This could be a network of national centers. The main conclusion for today is that we have to focus on some topics where we have comparative advantages in order to preserve them, and also to consider the competitive advantages that require long-term planning, but we have to work immediately, even to obtain the results in a few years. We have to prioritize those areas. That being said, I think we can wrap up our panel about the topic chosen by the organization of the webinar. We have had two productive hours. Thank you, the panelists, Mariana, Lucas, Sebastian, Davor, Bernardo, and Jorge. Once again, thank you so much, the panelists. Thank you so much to the attendees. Ana Laura is right here. And I give you the floor, Ana Laura, for your closing remarks. Thank you so much. I would like to thank the panelists for their contributions and Mr. Cavalcanti for being the moderator of this webinar.
And of course, I would like to thank you for the interest. Tomorrow, we'll give continuity to this webinar in a second chapter, so that we will be talking about data production for us to guarantee digital access tomorrow, Thursday, same time in the morning, 10 o'clock Brasilia time, to promote a better presence of the digital economy and data access, and also the strategic role that entails in our life. Thank you very much for all participants this morning and all present. Susana, Barrer, Daniel, Lucas, Mariana, Sebastian, Davor. So thank you very much for your ideas, and we wait for you tomorrow. Thank you very much for the day, and goodbye.
Buen día a todos.